Well, welcome to everybody. We have an eclectic group that's joining us today. For those of you that are new, I'll give a little bit of introduction to Funding Stories. Obviously going to introduce our guest here, Victor. But in general, just so you know, this is an event that we put on from time to time in order to give certain companies an elevated spotlight. To let them know about their stories, so we can learn from them, but also so they can let the world know, in the investment world, in the commercial world, to know what they're looking for as well. So it's another platform. So without further ado, welcome to Funding Stories. This is episode three. Funding Stories is a series where founders of deep tech companies tell the story of how their companies got funded and how they got started. Through a mixture of both venture capital as well as non-dilutive federal funds from the U.S. federal agencies. Funding Stories is hosted by Eagle Point Funding. My name is Josh Barrow, and I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Eagle Point Funding. And Eagle Point Funding is the world's premier grant consultancy. What we do at Eagle Point Funding is we help deep tech startups who want to raise capital without losing equity to tap into a $30 billion plus annual resource of funding, which is namely the US federal government. In episode 3, we are excited to have Victor Darolfi here with us. Victor is the founder and CEO of Robotire. Robotire is an autonomous robotics company that leverages a mixture of cloud-based machine learning, computer vision software, and robotics technologies to automate vehicle tire changes in under 15 minutes. Robotire is a Y Combinator company, has a relationship with Mitsubishi, and it's recently won non-dilutive funding from the United States Air Force for research and development, and is currently on track to win a contract with the United States Air Force. Without further ado, let's welcome Victor. Hi, Victor. Welcome.
Hey, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Victor, it's been a long time since we got a chance to see each other face to face. If you count this face to face today, but this is what we're dealing with in Corona controlled in 2020. Maybe give us a little background about who you are, and also what do you want to do when you grow up?
Yeah, a little background on myself is I grew up in Detroit in Michigan, so come heavily automotive, which is kind of nice full circle now. But you know, I moved out to the Bay Area in early 2009. Yeah, so it's been almost 11 years now out here. And then from there, I've been building robotic and automation work cells for the likes of Tesla, SpaceX, Apple, Intel, Zoom Pizza, CafeX, name it. And I've either built a robot to do it or been a consultant on it, from everything from assembly, pick and place, robots to make coffee, pizza, covered the whole gambit of what you think a big industrial robot could do instead of just at the factory level. This is my second startup. My first startup was actually got acquired. It was building battery packs for electric vehicles. So that's kind of a little bit about me. What would I want to do when I grow up? That's a good question. If I had all the money in the world and all the time in the world, I would actually want to open up my own brewery. That's kind of been my long-term goal. I have a hobbyist. My wife says I have too much in the closet, but I brew my own beer on the weekends when I have time. So I'd like to, sit back and relax and have a little brewery of my own to kind of play around with.
Okay, considering your background, I'm sure you would find a way to automate that with robotics as well.
Yeah, I'd probably put too much money into that.
Well, I mean, growing up in Michigan, was this what you envisioned when you were a kid, that you're gonna, be this robotics guy, and maybe be a CEO of a company that, automates robots for a living? Is this what you envisioned?
No, I mean, growing up, my grandpa was an engineer. My grandpa, worked for General Motors, and that's where, so I went to school. It was called Kettering University. Some people may know it as General Motors Institute. So heavily automotive. I knew from a young age that I wanted to be an engineer, but I never really thought I wanted to run my own company really until I moved out to the Silicon Valley, right? Because it's kind of a little bit of a different mindset. Um, I mean, funny enough, my dad had his own company when I was growing up. So like I kind of saw some of that, but it never really clicked. Hey, I want to go run my own company, until I got out here, kind of got into the ecosystem. And then, the main reason why I wanted to start my own company was more from not so much of the idea, but it was more from employees. So like there was, we all say we have a few good bosses and a few bad bosses. And, one of my bosses was kind of like the tipping point of like, hey, I have a way that I think employees should be treated or run, right? And I'm not going to be able to do that unless I'm running things, right? So that was kind of the main reason behind wanting to start my own company. I've learned a lot along the way, I'll tell you that much.
Are you saying because of how you wanted to be treated, or how you wanted others to be treated, or both?
A mix of both, right? There was just a mix of both, and right, wrong, or indifferent, I have a thought process, right? Now, if that is people may like it, people may not, but that's, at least I say, I've had one of my employees follow me from my previous company. So I got to think I'm doing something right if employees are following me. So
yeah, absolutely. So beyond the culture that you guys are creating, what is it your company currently, Robotire? What are you guys doing, and what is the need that your company is answering?
Yeah, so what the big view of Robotire is eventually when we automate almost all vehicle maintenance, even to the point where we've deemed it called the gas station of the future. So kind of where EVs are going to get charged, where electric vehicles are going to get serviced. We are kind of have a new envision of that. But where we started was with tires because they're consumable, and they're forever. So basically what that means is that any little bot to big rigs have tires, and tires aren't going away. So that's kind of where we started it with. And it's the easiest thing to automate it because it's the thing on the most outside of the vehicle. So that's kind of where we started. But yeah, we eventually want to get to a point where, the car's talking to us, we schedule it, it comes in, gets serviced, and then it's back in your driveway before you wake up, right? Type of stuff.
That's interesting because of all the parts in the car which are smart, tires are not one of them. So the car has to communicate with you based on mileage, wear and tear. So you're envisioning this autonomous system where smoothly you have self-driving cars, electric vehicles. They know to schedule an appointment to have a tire change, come up to you guys. They're there for less than 15 minutes and then are along the way.
That's the big vision. Now, depending on who you are and when you believe autonomy will kick in, that's a different story. But yeah, the car is very smart right now, the connected car. We know by miles, so we can start doing some of that where we're interfacing with the car. We're working with some of the vehicle OEMs right now, and that's also a nice thing that I am from Detroit. We're setting up in 2021. We're setting up an office in Detroit to kind of help facilitate that interaction with the big auto guys.
Amazing. So that's more to come in 2021.
Correct.
When did the company get started, and who started it?
Yeah, so unofficially I started it early 2008. Officially, I incorporated it at the end of 2008. It was me all the way up until November. Oh, sorry, I'm all off. 2018 is when I started. Not
just 10 years, not a big deal.
Just 2 years. Sorry, I was like, my time is all kittywonk with the COVID. But yeah, sorry. 2018 is when I unofficially started. October 2018 is when I incorporated November 2019 is when we hired our first employee. So I spent a good chunk of that first year doing a whole bunch of market research. Like I didn't know anything about the tire industry. I feel like I
Mhm.
know more about tires now than I ever thought I would ever want to know. Um, did a whole bunch of consumer marketing to figure out what was the best business strategy. Because you could see like, oh, you build robots to change tires. Well, do you sell those? Do you open up your own shops? Do you partner with people? So there was a lot of things that I had to kind of understand in the beginning part and like,
Mhm.
customer problems and all of that. And then from there, we put our robots in at our first shop in uh, January of this year. And then we've kind of lived in an auto shop ever since. I'm in an office now, but we spent the first 7 months of this year in an auto shop. And that was part of what I was doing in the beginning was finding a partner, finding a test bed to put our robots in. That's kind of the layout of how the company started.
Right. Amazing. And by getting that client in, I'm sure that was a huge obstacle for you to overcome at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I at that point I just had a concept, like a CAD model, and a theory,
Right.
and try to go pitch a shop to be like, hey, I'm a new startup, don't have a lot of money. Do you want to jump on this ride? Oh, and by the way, give me free space because I can't pay you. But luckily, I was able to find a shop out here that was a little bit more forward thinking. Like he's an EV shop. He's been known to try hardware out, and that's kind of the been a really good benefit for us is since we've lived in the shop, we actually use the text to tell us, hey, this is how we would do it, or this is how we'd handle a problem, and then we adjust, right? So we kind of get real time feedback on the system to how a mechanic would do it. And
Mhm.
to answer your other half of the question, what problem we're solving is, and here in the United States, we're facing a huge labor shortage from a technician standpoint because, to be honest, how many people want to lift a 50-pound tire 8 hours a day, 300 days a year, right? Not to mention, we pulled a lot of the vocational aspects from high schools, right? There's no more shop class. There's no more this. It's a little different in other countries, but at least here in the States,
Mhm.
that's the biggest problem we're facing is,
Mhm.
dealing with the labor shortage and also augmenting the work, right? Because most questions come up is like, oh, you're building robots, you're taking jobs away, right? And I say, you could look at it that way, but for us, it's just an augmentation of work. So instead of that operator, lifting the tire, he's now just overseeing the robot, right? So we're just augmenting the workload and, some things that we've been doing with some of the, if you want to call them like junior colleges or vocational colleges, is developing a Robotire program to bring a new breed of technician into the auto industry. Because, if you also look at the auto space, it's been changing. You have internal combustion engines, which is highly mechanical, to now a Tesla that has 72 computers on it, right? So you're not really turning wrenches anymore on a Tesla.
Is that the real number?
I,
72?
it's a guess. I
It
mean,
could be.
it's a lot. But, it's more of software diagnostics than anything else. So you kind of have
That's
to,
great. Yeah.
what we're trying to help the industry shift as well.
And has that been your biggest has that been your biggest challenge as a company, dealing with the perceptions of I'm stealing jobs, or dealing with the challenges of really integrating software and hardware and dealing with the shifting, changing of the market in the car industry?
Um, I
Or
think
neither. I'm throwing out options, but it could be none of those above.
Yeah, I mean, we do have that perception that, hey, you're taking jobs away or a tech can do this better, but we're also getting major traction, from the commercial side. We have, 6 other contracts. We're live, we're in pilots discussions with some of the big names in the industry, both from a tire OEM to big box retailers. So we're getting a lot of traction there. I think for us, the hardest part has been more from the technical side, because
Really?
the tire process is simple in itself if you think about it, of saying you got to pick a car up, remove lug nuts, remove the tire off the vehicle, change out the rubber, put weights on, and put it back on. Right? Theory, that sounds simple, but then you have all of the elements to factor in. So weather and climate, rust, snow, salt, etc. And then you have to think about it from a make and model perspective, right? There's a lot of vehicles out there. So there's a lot there. And we're kind of shifting the mindset of the industrial robotics, right? So before, in most cases, these robots were kind of siloed at the factory, so they don't talk. Now all of our robots are cloud computing. They pull from libraries of information that we've built, that way we can handle the variability. Because at 10 o'clock we may have to do a Prius, and then at 10:30 we have to do a Tesla. At 11 we have a Ford F-150, right? There's high variability, and I think that's been the biggest hurdle to get over first. It's not so much been the need, like from a customer standpoint. Like we have customers coming after us saying, we want this because this is solving the biggest problem in the industry for the past 7 years.
Yeah, 100%. So it's funny because most people will cite a financial challenge or hurdle that they had. I'm sure you had your share of those as well, or others will fight just a market challenge, just finding the market or entering the market. But you're saying really for you, it was a pure technological issue. I mean, it sounds like you were able to get really good traction across your industry, in your target market. But really, can I integrate computer vision, machine learning with a cloud-based system, which is at the end of the day hardware, right? It's robotics, right? That's incredible. That's incredible. Tell me, who are the people of Robotire? Who are these people who agreed to be in an auto shop for 7 months while
it's
developing
myself,
product?
Yeah, myself, and then my co-founder, Will, he actually comes from the industry. He's been in the auto industry for like 15 years now. He was a very early employer at Route One. He's been building software. He had another company that was digitizing the paper for dealerships. So like text messages, work orders, and all of that. And we met through a family friend, and he was solving the same problem that I was trying to solve, right? It was, how do you help dealerships speed up this process? And he was trying to do it from software. I was doing it from robotics, and we kind of met, and it was like, okay, this is like, we're both solving the same thing. Let's go after it. So it's me and Will, and then I have a mechanical engineer that came with me from my first company, and then we have a robotics engineer and a computer vision. So we're a small team, a team of 5. We've done a lot. That's just because we're all very skilled in what we do. My robotics engineer came from Mitsubishi Electric, who's a partner of us. And then my vision engineer came from cars.com. So.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Amazing. Hey, it's amazing that you've been able to do so much with so few people. Really incredible. Can you tell us about what was your biggest success, or was a smart move that you made regarding financing this company?
Well, I think it's early on, it was the 2 big partnerships, right? One was the partnership with the garage to get in there to be like, because everyone talks about going from like 0 to 1, like getting your first customer. And, I was able to get our first customer without having a product. So, and, we've got a test bed, we've been in there, we're not paying for it. And then the second was the partnership with Mitsubishi. So Mitsubishi Electric is our robot manufacturer. The same as like KUKA, Fanuc, Motomen. And I was able to pitch them on the same concept. I mean, luckily I've known them for 15 years as well, so that kind of helped. But I was like, hey, here is my concept. Is there any way you could help me out? And they helped us out early by, giving us basically our robots for free, throwing in software development to kind of help us get to where we needed with very little, capital. Because that's the other thing is we're hardware, we're an auto service. Most people don't know auto service. And when I ask people like, how big do you think the market is? They're normally off by a factor of 10, which is funny when you're talking in the billions to be off by a factor of 10. But so I think those are the biggest early on to keep the company going were probably the best two decisions that I've made to date, I'd say.
Okay. Let's talk about some less good decisions. Just think about, more the F word, the failure. What's something you've done that looking back, you would like to correct it? Or if somebody would come up to you and ask for advice on how to get your company up and running financially, what would you say to them? Don't do this.
That's a good question. I think, early on, we probably, your first couple investors, right? At least if you're doing it from like an institutional investor outside of family and friends, is very important because they're the ones that will, kind of make or break you. So I would say the biggest one would been, not properly vetting, but making sure you know who you're getting into bed with early and not be so concerned with, I need capital or this company is going to go under. Like you don't want to ever be behind the 8 ball. So there was just, that would probably be the biggest one is make sure you get, who your main investor is, right? To help you propel yourself because you can get an investor and then they could either help or hinder you, right? And early on, that's big because your seed investor is supposed to either help you follow up or make the introductions to your A, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now this year was very weird with with coronavirus, right? Like you mentioned, we got into YC earlier this year. We graduated YC in March, so right when the pandemic started. So there's not much you can say about a global pandemic to change the way you do things, but
right.
I think if that wasn't there, we probably would have been on a different trajectory. But that'd be my biggest thing.
Okay, fine, fair enough. I mean, it's a tough balance, I guess, because you're a company that is trying to prevent the company from going under, or for that matter, is trying to get a company up and running and needs some sort of capital. To tell them to be a little bit more picky is like it's a difficult thing to do, right? Do that extra little bit of research on who your investor is before you accept cash. It's probably something we need to hear more often because it's such an easy trap to fall into.
Yeah, and we were, from my side is we had a round open right before we got into YC, right? And we plus getting into YC, everyone wanted to get in before we went through and we had demo day. So I would say I probably would have been a little bit more picky because YC is only 3 months. We definitely could have survived for 3 months, but who knows what would have happened coming out of YC if we didn't have the capital to last the pandemic either, right? So it's always a tough one to kind of weigh.
It's possible to know. Impossible to know. Okay, can you say a moment that you're proud of, which is not necessarily connected to the financials?
A moment when the robots removed its first tire and didn't damage the tire was probably one of the proudest moments. We did, little insider info, we did hit a car once, but luckily it was a Robotire vehicle that we knew we were going to do. So that was probably like, the proudest moment was actually realizing this idea of a robot to take tires off, right? And then it actually coming to fruition.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the technical difficulties of this, simply taking off lug nuts. It's crazy the amount of the amount of exactitude that actually go into that without actually destroying a vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, the lug nuts are one of the hardest aspects of this business, right? Because how do you detect where they are? How do you know what lug nut it is? How do you prevent cross-threading? Because how do you, essentially have a robot mimic a human trying to thread on a nut, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot there.
Yeah, 100%. Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about federal grants. When did federal funding become part of your funding strategy?
It was early on, right? So, funny enough, in some of my previous lives, I actually worked for Lockheed Martin and kind of understood a little bit of like the grant side of it to help propel. So like when I sat back and looked at this, I was like, Robotire can touch so many aspects, not only from like a vehicle, from consumers, is like, let's really focus on the government side because, one way we look at this is we want to save people's health, right? When I got into robots, it was all about you're removing these labor intensive backbreaking works, right? And
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
for that side of it, especially in the military, how can we help these military personnel or veterans to give themselves a better outcome when they get out, right? But then with that being said, I also see the military as a way to really harden the tech, right? They're going to push the tech harder than any shop will, right? Because they'll push it to the extremes. So when I looked at it, I was like, yes, great non-dilutive funding, right? How can we help everyone? And then third is, how can they help me do better in the consumer side by basically destroying my tech and telling me what to fix, right?
So what is, I mean, what we know so far is that you got a grant from the United States Air Force. What does a tire focused robotics company have to do with the United States Air Force? Why are they interested in you, and why are you interested in them?
Yeah, I mean, the Air Force imagine them as the largest logistics provider, right? They're a logistics provider for any branch. So they're like the Amazon of the military, right? Where they're moving everything around, right? From planes to vehicles to all of that. And, the Air Force for us, some people said, oh, go to the Marines first or go to the Army first because they have vehicles, but the Air Force is the one moving everything around. So that's kind of where we started with. Plus, Travis Air Force Base is only about 2 hours north of us here. So that was kind of of course, there's other Air Forces base out here in the Bay Area. But we started talking with them, understanding their pain points. And so that's why we kind of picked the Air Force to start, is just from a logistics aspect.
100%. Okay. And what is it? What has winning a federal grant done for your company so far?
Well, it's been a huge win, right? Because it kind of gives validation when you pitch like private investors and all of that, of like, there's more than just like the consumer side. It's more than just a Costco or America's Tire. You could branch out in other ways, right? And then once you kind of take that to the next level, when you get past this first grant, whether you go, direct to phase 3 or however that, and you become, basically any branch could grab your system, and then add on other funding outside of that. So, there's tactical financing that the Air Force can throw on top of it, which is even more non-dilutive funding. So it's a way to kind of, offset. So investor looks at it and says, look, if you get $1 million from the government, and I put in $1 million, essentially you've raised $2 million, but they also don't have to worry about another person on the cap table diluting them, right?
Right. 100%. So you're saying you're envisioning this going out, moving forward?
Yeah. So, right. It's in talking with the Air Force, even big Air Force, they're like, can you go change tires on a C5? And I'm like, yes, I think I can. A tire is a tire for me. But we see it because, you look at any military base, it's kind of like a tiny city. And they have everything from, a forklift all the way up to large construction vehicles, right? So we kind of see this as, start with the first one, get it deployed on a small set of vehicles, and then continue that development with the military to go next sets. And depending on which one's moving faster, right? Maybe we do some development on, construction vehicles for the military, and then we bring it out to the commercial side, or vice versa. We bring out a solution that could go handle big rigs or semi trucks, and then we could say, hey, look, here's now the solution for you, right? So it's a little bit of going back and forth.
So it basically playing in your goal to sell to a federal customer while also pushing forward your commercial technology.
Correct.
Cool. Very cool. Let's jump back into private sector investments for a moment. Are you looking to raise funds right now?
We're closing around now, and then we'll probably be opening up our Series A early next year. And a lot of that is contingent on some of larger contracts that are falling with some of the big names in the industry.
Okay. What are you looking to raise in the round?
The new round, that is all depending. We'll probably push north of 10 million for our Series A. Is kind of a target, but we'll see where we get there.
Okay. And what are you looking for in an investor at this point?
Well, in any investor we look is, one, believe in the vision that we go to, right? Of, hey,
Okay.
automation or vehicle maintenance needs to be automated. Right now, whether that be from a robotic side, from a vehicle side, so we kind of look for that to kind of align ourselves, especially, we talked about it, the gas station of the future, where we put in basically mobile automated service centers. So one person that kind of believes in that journey. Then the other side of it is, because we're hardware, it's difficult. So we're going to run into roadblocks down the road. So it's kind of another side of it is like an investor that kind of wants to get their hands dirty a little bit, or like be that sounding board of, hey, the robot just did this. Like, what do you think? Not necessarily knowing if they would know the answer, but just a sounding board different than me hearing my own voice. Or my wife's, whichever one.
Okay, one last question, then we'll turn it over to some Q&A questions I already see pop up in the chat. What are some funding related actions that you would recommend a budding startup to take on if they want to get things started? It seems like, I'm sorry to push this forward, but from what I've learned from you, you went and you proved the product first, or you at least tested the product before you went and raised. Is that something that you took forward from the previous startup you had?
Yeah, my biggest thing was, prove, well, one, hardware is tough, right? So you got to either make a proof of concept or something that fundamentally says, hey, this can work, right? And the second is actually making sure there's a market, right?
Okay, that's huge.
Everyone talks about, product market fit, and yes, it'll take a little bit to get truly product market fit, but, especially with robotics, you want to make sure you're building something that actually has a big benefit or a delta, right? At least in my view. So when I was doing this and I was looking at, everything to do with the robotics, like what can I do? when I looked at this, I was like, hey, this is the biggest delta. Let me go tackle this. Now, with that being said, it's also, no one's doing this, so it's also a lot harder because from an investor standpoint. But I would, what I would say is, really understand your market and, do a POC, right? Try to do a proof of concept and just get real world customer feedback before jumping into that. That would be my step. But, if you have an idea and a VC wants to give you $5 million for it, I'd say go right ahead for it.
POC or not. Okay. Okay, let's turn it over to a couple questions. Let's take a couple questions up here. This is a question from Patricia. Patricia, who is your most memorable mentor?
Let's see, my most memorable mentor. Probably my dad, right? Again, looking back now, running my own company, like I didn't understand the struggle that it happens when, you're the last buck essentially when it comes down to it, and making all the decisions. So I would say looking back now, it'd probably be my dad and like kind of understanding, the struggle that he went through, just running a company, having a family and supporting. So that'd probably be who I'd say.
Amazing, amazing. Outside of family members, I mean, your dad, your mom, everybody who's making their big influence in the early years. What about in the business world? Who did you come across that was a mentor that I'm sure there's certain things you learned not to do, but what was something that stuck out to you from a mentor? Could be learning from a perspective or a way, or from just technological genius. I mean, who struck you along the way?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have one in particular, right? Because kind of, love to absorb everything from the robotic space. I've gotten a great opportunity to meet some very interesting people. Like I met the guy that invented the inkjet printer, right? And just hearing this guy think about ways of doing things has been, amazing from that side of it. Met a lot of smart, met a guy that sold 2 companies to Google, right? And he used to run Google's head of robotics, and just understanding the way these guys think about things. So I don't think there's one that was like, oh my God, like this is the guy I need to do. And I think a lot of it is just a community, right? That's a nice thing also in the robotic space, is the community is very big and large and everyone wants to help out. So it's kind of like, back before COVID, there was all these, meetups, whether it's First Robotics, whether it's out here in the Valley, it's beer and bots type of things, right? Where people just get together and be like, hey, this is what I'm working on. Like, oh, okay, well, did you ever think about it this way? And then, the other side of this is also, just, I say I got an MBA from real life, right? And just like understanding, because I've worked, this is my second startup. So the first startup was a very interesting struggle because I didn't know a lot of the things it takes to run a company, I would say. I kind of saw some stuff outside of it, but the biggest thing is you learn more from your failures than your successes, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. No doubt about that at all. Okay, Victor, thank you so much for joining us. Just a quick recap: we were joined by Victor Darolfi, who's the CEO of Robotire, autonomous robotics company, doing amazing things. Robotire is not your first merry-go-round. On the other hand, I'm sure you're learning tons of new business as well as technological insights from the startup. If you're an investor and you'd like to reach out to Victor, you can do so on the many different media channels, preferably on LinkedIn or through email. You can be in contact with me to be in touch with Victor as well. And thank you for joining another episode of Funding Stories together with Eagle Point Funding. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Victor.